It's so good to connect. I will tell you, most of my interviews are through the lens of career advice, and so the topic is very near and dear to my heart.
I'm very glad we're talking, and it's a pleasure to be on with you.
Awesome. Where I wanted to start is I was reading the acknowledgments, and you mentioned that your twin brother, Gil, gave you a lot of feedback about the book. And I'm just wondering, it's really cool to have a twin brother to give you that type of feedback. What's the best piece of advice he gave you?
It is very cool that you're reading the acknowledgments. No one reads the acknowledgments.
That's
But
I mean
that's where you
I
get
love to,
interesting
yeah,
information.
100%.
Like there you're like, oh, hello. Yeah. What's the best piece of advice he gave me? There are a bunch of them in the book. But if you mean like like in life in general, he still is a great mirror for me, not because we're twins in that way, but because he can reflect, he doesn't hold back. If he hears that I'm too stressed, even to this day, he'll go, you've sounded a little irritable the past few times we're talking. What's happening? Are you monitoring stress okay? Because you're sounding out of sorts. Or like, he knows me so well, he can call me on stuff and does. Like he's a great, that's what I mean, a mirror. Like he can show me where I'm at in ways that I might miss. And it's an amazing asset. We speak every day. So he's on it. It's great.
What does he do for a living?
Well, he's a psychologist, but look,
That's fantastic.
he is. He's a he's an organizational psychologist more than a clinical. He was trained as a clinician, but now he does organizational psychology. He has a company that he founded with his wife to hire people with severe disabilities who've never worked before, and but we think very much alike despite our different angles in psychology. We're very similar in our thinking.
Okay, a related question. What did your parents do for a living, and how did that maybe impact some of the career choices maybe that you and Gil both made?
Um, we like to think, my brother and I, that our apples fell a little further, perhaps,
Tell
than,
me about that.
than Newtonian gravity would suggest. um, we're the first people in our family to go to college. So we kind of we're identical. We've always been extremely close, and we kind of were much more significant influences in our lives than our parents were.
Interesting. Okay. My wife will say this to me. She's like, "Oh, that thing you did, like usually it's rooted in your childhood or something." Is that true for most people, or like how do you think
Well,
of
well, let
that?
me just say this.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. When we were both getting our PhDs, we got them in different places in clinical psychology. Time and again, we had the feeling that what we're learning is really about childhood influence, the parents' influence, all of those things is really impactful and important and just did not apply to our situation that well. There's something about being an identical twin. You grow up in such a different environment. Here's an example. We were in the same classroom throughout, all of school, even throughout high school, the same classroom. That's usually not, they separate identical twins. They
Oh.
did not separate us. Now, you do not need to develop social skills in that situation because the minute you walk into a room, everyone's paying attention because you're identical twins. It's a phenomenon, right? So it's like you don't have to like learn how to get attention. You have to learn how to avoid it, if anything, because it just is on you all the time. It's just a very different kind of experience. And we were very, very close and very supportive of one another. We were lucky. I mean, we never really we were never competing. We were always cooperative. We were always helping one another. I'm sure there are brothers that really get into it and smash each other's faces out. But it was not us. We were always there for one another. So it was just such a unique,
Wow.
um, formative experience that, in both our educations, we never felt like we read anything that really pertained to us, significantly in that way.
Okay. Interesting. Wow. What would you say was the most surprising or fascinating thing that you learned through researching and writing this book, Mind Over Grind? I'll just read it real quick. How to break free when work hijacks your life. What was that? Did you have an aha moment through your research?
Oh, there were many aha moments through my research because a lot of the research, the way I approach it was I had these clinical experiences with the people I worked with. I follow 5 people in the book throughout the entire book. So you get like the narrative, the story of them throughout the book and what they go through in a typical period, in a specific period in their work lives. And by the way, people say to me like, "Oh, I hope nothing bad happens to them." And I'm like, there wouldn't be a book if nothing bad happened to them. This is about problems in the workplace. So yeah, bad things happen to them.
People go to you because they have problems, right?
Yes. Well, also, and if I'm going to talk about, if I want to, I want through them, I wanted to talk about the issues in the current workplace. And if they didn't have them, they wouldn't, I wouldn't have chosen them as these examples. But I'm sorry, now I forgot the question.
Yeah, I was just like, what was there like? What was the most surprising thing? Because there was always
Right.
that saying like, you write the book that you need, or something like that, or um, you know, uh,
Yes.
I think Dan Pink said like, all research is me search, right? Was there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, look, so first of all, I talk about myself in the book because I've made all the mistakes that I talk about practically, in the book. I mean, I just went through them. I start the book with getting burnt out in year 1 of my career. So like, I'm definitely, like patient zero in a lot of that stuff. But what was interesting is like many times I've worked with many people, seen this thing happen. And then when I dive into the research, I'm like, oh, well, here we go. It's just shown over and over again in the research. It was very validating to read the research. A lot of it I knew ahead of time, but when you write a book, you do much deeper dives into the research. And so a lot of it is just like confirmational for me. Now, once in a while, it would be like, not exactly this, and I have to pivot my thinking a little bit. But one of the things I guess that surprised me a lot was the research about vacations. I end the book with a chapter about the science of restorative vacations, and like I again, this is something that I practiced a lot and I thought about a lot, and it's great to find out that there's so much science going on about it. But I always believe that more short vacations are much better than the 2-week extravaganza. Or let's take 3 weeks off once a year and kind of you know, really feel horrible until that 3 weeks arrives. And then you get 3 weeks. And I always felt like I get the benefit usually 5, 6, 7 days. I feel good. And then the research really shows that, you want to take more frequent, shorter vacations. That was very kind of, oh, that's very useful. And that even small breaks can be very impactful. So that was something I was surprised to see that there was so much research to confirm.
there was a page where you wrote about and you shared this story of somebody who I think you said needed a break. They needed some distance to get perspective, and they were going through a career transition. And that page, this morning I like texted it to like 3 or 4 different people. I just thought like, they take a vacation and they're going maybe to Disneyland or something like that. And your thought was, I thought was it's really fascinating, was like, dude, that's not a vacation for you. That is like you're sitting with kids throwing up on, roller coasters. Can you rethink how you can vacation to meet both of the needs of the children and the parents? I thought that was just a perspective I didn't, I think about that with my own family, like a perspective I just hadn't thought about.
Parents make that mistake all the time. They're the ones who are working so hard, especially when they have young kids. They're working, then they have the kids, they're totally burnt out, and the vacation is entirely dedicated to the kids' needs when the kids are not burnt out. The kids are 5. They're fine. So yeah, you don't want them to be bored. You want activities for them, but you absolutely have to like address your own needs and figure out what you need, and what kind of break you need.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. I feel like the concept of burnout is, I feel like it's something I've experienced. I'm sure many of your patients have, and you have. What would you, like maybe in a career context, can we come to an agreement on like, what does that really mean?
Look, this term of the grind, it's mind over grind, because the
Yeah.
grind, when you're burnt out, first of all, I mean, you're just tired all the time. You're exhausted. There's this fundamental bone deep kind of tired that, a good night's sleep does not touch. And you're over it. It just feels like you're going through the motions. You're just trying to get through the day, knock off one task after another, get through this meeting, get through the next meeting, it's a slog and you feel kind of cynical about it. You don't feel like, oh, I'm doing great work, I'm doing meaningful things, this really matters, even if it should or does or did. It's just you get jaded from it. When I was burnt out, I was year one. I felt like I'd been doing it for 30 years at that point. That's what the feeling was like. It was just like, okay, another client, another day, another day. There was no joy left. There's no excitement left in any of it. But that's when you're already in burnout. I wrote this book to help people back away from it, but also kind of not fall off that cliff because it comes suddenly, the tipping point where you just are like, oh, done.
Do you feel like most people that you work with, they recognize that they're burned out,
No,
or they don't?
no, I didn't. First of all, no, most people don't. Most people, look, today that term is bandied about more. So people actually use it quite incorrectly. They'll use it like, oh, I have such a day, I really feel burnt out. But you don't feel that burnt out after one bad day. You feel burnt out on the good days, the bad days, and all the days. Um, but most people they don't pause long enough to ask themselves that question. And they certainly don't pause long enough to look at the ramifications of the answer, because the ramifications should be severe, like you are, and what are you doing then about it? I just need to slog through for another few years. At this state, you're not being that productive. You're miserable. What about quality of life? What about health? I mean, burnout is impairs our health. So most people don't pause long enough to stop and how am I doing with this? They're just trying to get through. They're so burdened with duties. They're just trying to get through them all. And that's the real problem.
Okay, I've got a few questions after this, but like when we're stressed, how do you describe what happens to us physically and emotionally?
Look, physically, when stress kind of puts your body into fight or flight, generally, that's the stress response. Your body goes on high alert. And your body doesn't distinguish well between whether that high alert is, because, you're on some kind of battlefield, you're
In
doing
an
a
ice
hunt.
bath or
Yeah,
something? Yeah.
well, the ice bath is very, you're not in there for half an hour, right? You're in there that's just to sharpen your stress response, supposedly, to kind of, like acute stress, which is the ice bath, is actually good for you because it sharpens you, and then, the stress goes up, you get out, and then it comes down, and your system learns to kind of go up and then come down. It's the coming down part that we start to fail at when the stress is chronic, because you're up, and then you're up, and then you're still up, like, because the modern day work field is like the old day battlefield. It's like, but when we were nomadic, we would go on hunts. It would be once, I don't know, a week, two, like it wouldn't be stressful all the time. But
Hmm.
now we're stressed. We go in and we're in these difficult work environments with these office politics and tension between teams and corporate, mergers. So one team's going to go and the other team's all stressed, and it's only going to happen in a year, but everyone knows it. So every minute you have to watch out. Like, you are in activation all the time. And when your body and your mind are activated, right? Your body responds differently. It shuts down certain things, hyper certain things. Like your digestive system, like goes a certain way. Blood flows to your extremities. You're on high alert. It's not a state you are meant to be in for 8, 10 hours a day, day after day after day after day. That's where the wear and tear happens, and mentally as well. You are on alert all the time. It's very difficult after doing that for 8, 9 hours a day to get home and then relax. We don't turn on a dime in that way. We cannot. And so that's where the wear and tear comes. And certainly I talk in the book, and I'm sure we'll get there, about, everything that happens after work that maintains that level of stress, and there's no break from it. And that's part of what contributes to the burnout. Like, people are aware about burnout. People are aware that the work-life balance matters, but people are getting burnt out because they don't know how to shut it off. They don't know how to come down from that high level of activation. And so they're activated and on fight or flight all the time. And that's the exhaustion.
That makes sense. Definitely want to get into that as well. One of the things I was thinking about is you've heard the saying, like, you don't quit your company, you quit your manager. Um, how do you consult people when maybe they're looking for that next job? And I'm sure everyone's in a different situation, right? One person might have one offer and they just jump at it, but like, how important is it to work for the right person when you think about maybe future induced stress?
The people you work for and with determine your quality of life at work. Yes, your job might be meaningful. You might work. I mean, I've worked with people who work with companies who do the most important thing, and the work they're doing is extremely important, and they can't stand it because of the people they work with. So what's the point of it? And it's great that you're doing amazing work, and you can't stand the people you're doing it with because they're so terrible, or they're so difficult, or they're so, so the quality of life is about the people. We are social animals. That's what determines the quality of life. If you're in a good environment, that means a lot. And when I say to people like, and some people will say to me like, I just want more, but they have a great setup. The hours are great. They make decent amount of money, and for that money, typically they would have to put in these kinds of hours, and they don't. There are not a lot of eyes on them. They get to go to the gym, and they get to go pick up the kid when they need to do that. All of that kind of stuff happens, and they like the people they work with generally. And I say to them, you need to quantify in your own head how much that is worth in comp, because that's what you want to compare to. It's not about, can you get a 10% bump in comp? Is that 10% a quality of life improvement or not? And it's a gamble, unless you somehow know all the people there. Is it a gamble that you want to take because you have it sweet right now?
On the people part, is there a way that we can figure that out in advance as best as possible? Obviously, you go through an interview process, but is there a tip that you give people? Maybe they're in transition for the next job, and the people part was terrible previously. What advice do you give them to try to find the right people situation?
Look, most people on both sides of the desk are on good behavior in job interviews, right? I mean, it's like dates. Mostly you try and put your best foot forward. If somebody says something really inappropriate, obnoxious during a first date, it's a huge warning sign, because that's supposed to be the best of them. That's supposed to be them making an effort. If that's them making an effort and they're still annoying, or they're still obnoxious, or they're still difficult, or they're still impenetrable, so the same thing with job interviews. You can try and assess the people, but usually they're interviewing you, and yeah, they give you a chance to ask questions at the end, but you can ask certain questions. You can't, it's difficult to see them, but you want to, sometimes you can walk into an office. If again, these days, so much of that is virtual, which is unfortunate because you don't get that flavoring. But sometimes in person, you can walk into an office and get a vibe of, is it a friendly vibe? I mean, there were certain workplaces I would go visit friends because I've been self-employed most of my life, but I was like, oh God, the tension here. I just walked through the door and I somehow can, it's like a soup. I can feel it, like there's a tension, or a very friendly vibe, because you see people smiling, you see people stopping by each other's desks and, doing, a little thing on the shoulder, and you can see, oh, that's a nice friendly vibe. So sometimes you can see it, but it's hard to assess.
Makes sense. And you mentioned good stress, and I have like the upside of stress on my desk. I haven't read it yet, but so do you believe that there are good types of stress to maybe also help increase our stress tolerance?
Mhm. Look, I mean, it's not a belief. That's the scientific fact of it. There are good forms of stress. Again, acute stress, when it's manageable and it's not too repetitive, not too, extensive, can be good for us. And that's why people take the ice baths and and such. And stress is not a bad thing in and of itself. It's a natural physiological response which trains you to be responsive to threats and dangers, and to things that require your attention. If you didn't have a stress response, you wouldn't you'd walk into traffic without realizing that you need to pay attention. So stress isn't bad in and of itself. It's bad again when it becomes chronic, when it becomes unmitigated, when we don't have a chance to come down from it. So
Okay.
that's what people need to think about.
One of my favorite quotes is when you said, "Our workday only ends when we stop thinking about work." Our workday only ends when we stop thinking about work. When I read that line, it was almost like I just saw, like I was dreaming, and I just saw the past 20 years of my life when I was thinking about work after 5 o'clock, or, the coworker that pissed me off. And I was like thinking about it over the weekend. Right. Um, how do you like when you're talking with people, how do you explain the concept of just like ruminating?
So, by the way, when I give talks to companies, I always ask the audience, like, what time do you finish work in this company? And they always go 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, and there's always some guy that goes, well, I stay till 9, and everyone hates him. Anyway, but and then I say to them, that's not when you finish work. your body and your mind don't care what time you leave the office or what time you close your laptop at home. They care what time you stop thinking about work. Because if you're thinking about work when you're home, you're at work and you're not engaged in whatever you're doing at home. You're not present in whatever's happening at home. And you need to think about it that way, because here comes the rumination piece. To ruminate means to chew over. And it's a natural thing we do. We self-reflect on distressing, upsetting things that have happened during the workday. It's how we process. But what people don't understand is there's a big difference in how we do it. You can do it in a productive way, and you can do it in a very unhealthy, unproductive way. And our tendency is to do it in unhealthy, unproductive ways. You mentioned the arguments with a coworker. It's a very common thing. Somebody insulted you, they were upsetting, they were, competitive, there was something you're very annoyed. You're going to get home and you're going to stew about that.
Guy,
And
they were disrespectful, and I just kept thinking, you know what? He's going to retire in a few years and I'll just outlast him. And I just kept thinking about that. Like,
yeah, but
what a
tell me you
terrible way.
didn't have like a fantasy argument in which you were actually going to read him the riot act in your head and imagine all the stuff you wish you could tell him. And if you could tell him, you would tell him this and you would tell him this, and there would be these mic drop moments and you would have all these great one-liners. And that's what we do. We're not going to do it because you can't do it. You can't do it with your boss, but you can spend 3 hours imagining what those conversations might be. In doing so, here's what you're actually doing. First of all, you're back at work. B, you're taking a 2-minute upsetting incident from the workday and replicating it for 3 hours for some reason, ruining your mood, stressing yourself up. When we ruminate, when we flood our body with cortisol, we are literally on high alert. We are back in the situation. The more you ruminate about work when you're home, the more likely you are to have sleep disturbances, to ruin your mood, to eat unhealthy foods, because that's how we soothe when we're irritable and preoccupied and upset and pissed. Over time, that can predispose you to depression, to cardiovascular risk, because again, you're activated all the time. Your body's not getting a break. And to me, most of the shame is that whatever you're supposed to be doing there, with your partner, with your kids, with your family, with your friends, whatever the scenario is, you're not present in it, you're checked out. So you're actually missing the life part of the work-life balance. When I talk about the work-life balance, people always say, oh, I added an hour of yoga. And I'm like, okay, that's terrific. I'm all for yoga. However, let's talk about the life part is the regular living part. It's being present in doing the homework with the kids and putting them to bed and having a date night with your partner and going out with your friends or sitting by yourself and watching, a show that you really like. That's life. Be present for that. Don't be checked out of that. That's the basic. So ruminating about work, it just extends your workday. It's unpaid overtime. It's damaging to you. And people need to catch it as an unproductive thing that they're doing, an unhealthy thing, and realize, oh, this is not useful to me at all. I need to stop.
What would you say is the best sort of tool that you found to because I feel like it's a natural thing to do. Like it's when people, like, I've heard the saying of like comparing yourself to others. Yes, it's a bad thing, but it's also a very sort of natural thing to do. I feel like ruminating is maybe similar in that sense. What have you found is the best way to recognize it and hopefully limit it?
So first of all, to recognize it, if you're ruminating, you're actually feeling it viscerally, because A, you're stressing yourself out, and B, you're reactivating whatever the upset was that you're thinking about. If it's a worry, if it's anxiety, if it's feeling dismissed, if it's feeling frustrated, if it's feeling resentful, whatever those feelings are, and there's often many of them, so you're feeling those things. You've had that thought 10 times already. You thought about, how rude that person was, the coworker that's still there for a few more years, but then you think back the other time they were rude and the other people they were rude to, and suddenly you're like, it's you're literally playing the greatest hits, and only to your own dismay. And so you need, again, you need to catch it and label it as harmful. I'm ruminating, it's harmful. Ruminations are often intrusive thoughts. You don't really have control over them. They feel compelling. It feels like I'm doing something important. I'm processing. And I would say, are you? Because if you're processing, there is a product at the end of it. There is a takeaway, there is a conclusion, there is an insight, there are action items, there are the solutions that you found. You didn't do any of that. So you're not processing, you're stewing, you're ruminating. By all means, process. That would be more useful. But you're not getting anything in it. You're not problem solving. You're not doing anything that has a utility.
Okay, makes sense. And so what do you say in terms of like, okay, that's a good way of recognizing it. And what is a good way to limit it? Like you, because it's so hard to just say, oh yeah, like I shouldn't think about that.
No, you can't say that. That doesn't work. Thought stopping is not a thing. The more you tell yourself, don't think about something, the more it'll reoccur to you.
Okay.
So that doesn't. Psychology doesn't work that way. You need to convert. I mean, because there's an urge to ruminate. There's unfinished business in your brain
Okay.
about this upsetting thing. So finish the business, i.e., think about it in a productive way. Problem solve it. Pose it as a question to be resolved. Do I need to speak with the obnoxious coworker and set a boundary with them? Or they never respond well to that. How can I avoid that kind of situation going forward? How can I shut them down when they begin so at least I don't have to sit through 2 minutes of it, in a meeting? How can I maybe go to my boss and say, hey, this is very annoying and I've tried speaking to the person. They don't, can you maybe talk to them? And if you can't do any, and all of these are trying to solve the
Yes.
actual problem. And then if I need to talk to them, by the way, people say like, okay, okay, I've solved it. I need to have a conversation. I'm like, no, you didn't solve it. What's the conversation? Because when people then go in and they'll just start venting, like, no. What's the point of the conversation? What do you want to walk away with? What's the result you want to achieve by having a conversation? Now work backwards. How's the best way to achieve
Okay.
that result? Venting is rarely it. It's usually a much more strategic kind of thought process. But once you've done that, then you've actually solved something. You've resolved it sufficiently so your mind can probably let go of it more.
I love that. I wish I learned this at that moment. I was in another meeting with somebody that he supported, a client, and I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the support of that person? Hoping for a 1 or 2. You know what he said? 9. And I thought to myself, damn, like this guy, he must be doing something right,
No, but that's very important information, by the way, right? Because if that kind of situation happens, there are two options. Either you are doing something to rub that person the wrong way, and which case then there's something to figure out there, like how do I,
Yes.
get to a better relationship with that person, or the guy you asked is an idiot, and really just limit, having just saying,
Yeah.
like the very poor judge of character or has such a limited scope of interaction with them that they're judging them really based on much finer points in terms of like service delivery or something like that, as opposed to actually cohabiting and then cooperation.
Yes. It's so funny. Okay. If it's okay with you, let's jump around a little bit.
Sure.
Okay. So procrastination, obviously a thing that causes maybe undue stress. What have you found is the most useful way to, again, maybe sort of recognize? I know it's something I struggle with. I'm sure most people do to some extent, except my wife. She doesn't procrastinate at all. But what have you found is a good way to like sort of stop it in its tracks and then remedy that?
First of all, understand that what we procrastinate on is not the task itself, but the feelings the task evokes. This is a boring task. It's an obnoxious task. It's a tricky one. It's, unpleasant in some kind of way. So I don't want to do it. I want to push it off. So, but the task itself, how long does it take? Like most of them don't take that long. So let's say there's a 15-minute task here, a 30-minute, an hour even. So you have that at the beginning of the work week to do. You're not doing it because you want to avoid the hour of unpleasantness it might cause. And to that end, you keep pushing it off and pushing it off, pushing it off, actually spending 5, 6 hours thinking about this task or trying not to do it, but it's in the back of your mind. You're literally supersizing the unpleasantness it causes unnecessarily. Right. Because and for example, people always say to me like, oh, I just, for me, like I hate things like, like doing the dishes, loading the dishwasher. And I'm like, how long does that take? Like, why don't you do it quickly and time it? And realize like you're putting this thing off and then everything starts to smell and and then you do it for 5 minutes, whatever.
Yeah. You know what's
The
funny? Man, I just
yeah,
add to that. So my
yeah.
wife will say, why does it take you so long to wash the dishes? And it's something and she doesn't like to use the dishwasher, which I love to use. And so I'll hand wash everything. But I want to listen to a podcast or like have enough time where there is 10 minutes, like instead of 5 minutes, it might take 10 minutes, but at least I'm like listening to something, doing this task versus doing something I hate.
Right. So what you figured out, and this you can explain to your wife, is that I am taking longer because by taking longer, I'm turning the unpleasant task in a into a pleasant one. Because now I'm getting to listen
Yes.
to a podcast. If it were 5 minutes, I really wouldn't get into it that much. But now I get to do something and make it more, less unpleasant, even somewhat pleasant for myself. So that's the goal, and that's why it takes a little bit longer. I'm trying to find the balance there. Look, and one thing I suggest in the book, which I think has been useful for a lot of people, is that it's how we frame those tasks. If you frame it, oh, I hate doing this, I can't stand doing that, you're actually stoking the unpleasantness that the task causes, perhaps unnecessarily, because you're like really making a much big deal out of it. What I do, I think of these tasks as nuisances. As a nuisance, because the way we psychologically think about a nuisance, it's something we take care of right away. Right?
Mm.
Nobody goes on a hike for 7 miles, gets a pebble in their shoe after mile one, and goes, I'm going to take this annoying thing out in 2 to 3 miles. You take it out right away. It's a pebble. It's annoying you. A tag in your collar is annoying you. A fly is flying around you. You swat at it. It's frustrating. So if you can think of it, oh, I have this nuisance task to do, you're much more likely to get to it quickly. But the other thing is, remind yourself that you want to spend as least time as possible with the tasks that you don't like, and the only way to do that is to do them as soon as possible.
Interesting. What do we get wrong about self-sabotage at work?
Oh, so much. um, we do it in so many ways, that we don't quite realize. Procrastinating is one of them. But in general, here's the thing: when we're faced with an unpleasant task, and I gave a few examples about this, in the book, we're likely to want to avoid it. And so if we, let's say, have a very difficult meeting coming up, and it's just, we find it with this obnoxious client or this coworker that I don't like, the thing we should be doing is sitting, strategizing ahead of time about how to manage that meeting. How can I kind of get my coping mechanisms like raring to go, so I can come in not reactive, but kind of reflective, defended, kind of ready, so I know how I might respond when he says this annoying thing or she does that thing that she does, which I can't stand. And like, being thoughtful about how to avoid certain things, how to, like stay low on things where you want to, like being strategic.
You mentioned
We're,
an important word though, coping mechanism at work. Because I can think of like coping mechanism in my personal life, eating junk I shouldn't be eating before bed. What's like just an example of a coping mechanism at work, you think?
A coping mechanism at work is, for example, knowing that you're going into a meeting and calling a colleague and saying, hey, will you have 5 minutes in an hour? Because I'm going to come out of that meeting. I'm going to need to vent. I'm telling you right now. Can we meet in the break room so I can vent to you and get some support? Would be a coping mechanism. Going in ready for the annoying thing to happen because you can anticipate it, as opposed to just going and hoping it won't,
Mm.
is a coping mechanism. It's an anticipation. It's an acceptance of something that's about to happen. Like, so, those are different ways of coping, is what coping mechanisms
Okay.
are. What we do, though, we don't do that. What we do is we're just like, we try and distract ourselves before the meeting because we're anxious about it. So let's just go on social media and distract ourselves, or let's not think about it because I find that upsetting or distressing. So I'd rather not spend even more time distressed, even though the point of that is to prepare you so that you have a less distressing experience when you are in the meeting. That's an example of self-sabotage. So another example of self-sabotage is when you have a very demanding day, and this is 90-something% of people, I'm making up the number, but people don't do this. They have a very upsetting day, and they do not strategize where they need to get breaks in the day. They just take a deep breath and dive in and hope to make it through by the end of the day. Well, by the end of the day, your cognitive abilities are going to be, in decline. Your creativity is going to be in decline. You're going to make more mistakes because you're so stressed out and you didn't take any relief during the day that's useful. You just maybe went to social media or did something just to distract yourself, as opposed to actually reviving yourself during the day. That's another form of self sabotage. In general, if you ask me, not monitoring your stress levels throughout the day and throughout the week is a form of self sabotage,
Mm.
because you will end up making more mistakes. Being heated about something before you go into a conversation without taking a minute or two or three, whatever it is, to calm yourself down is going to lead to more conflict than cooperation, and a poorer outcome, because you didn't actually attend to your emotional state and do something about it. You went in charged and more reactive, and so the many ways we kind of do that.
You mentioned this, I think, in the book, and you just had said it, but like doom scrolling on Instagram before a meeting could be, the one of the worst things you can do, right? It's better to maybe take a 5-10 minute walk than look at someone else's highlight reel.
Yeah, because no one, again, I don't know any of the people that I follow on Instagram. I don't follow that many, but I don't know. I just don't, I post on social media. I have somebody who helps me do it, but I don't spend a lot of time because it's not necessarily a good thing for me. And I'm disciplined about it because I know it's not. But when I see my friends, I have never yet seen a picture of them looking morose in a cubicle. I have never seen anyone, weeping silently in the restroom after a difficult meeting. That's not what anyone posts on social media. There they are with their friends having a great time, or with their coworkers after work and the one good day they had. So it's not very accurate. It'll just make you feel like, oh, everyone else's life is better than mine. That's not what you need to see. But also it's like that's avoidance, that it's not recharging. You want to like
Yeah.
replenish a little bit. You want to do something that gives you a second wind. You want to do something that revives you a little bit, or that prepares you for what's coming up, in some kind of way.
I think that's great advice because the phone is like it's so within reach that it's so easy
Yeah.
to reach for that. So let's hit on this. Obviously, I think this is one of the most important things. Like, what are some things people should be doing to manage that stress from work, maybe when they get home, rather than doing things that they shouldn't be doing? What are a couple of those things that come to mind?
So when you get home, like there are certain ingredients to having a recovery from the workday. First of all, the research is very clear. The more stressful and demanding and difficult the workday was, the more essential it is for you psychologically and physiologically to actually recover from the workday. And recover means to allow your arousal, your nervous system to calm down from it. In other words, to come out of fight or flight. And there are two ingredients that are important, and we tend to over-index on one. And that first ingredient is to rest and relax. Unfortunately, when we come home and we're drained mentally, we confuse the mental drain with physical drain. So I'm wiped out. I can just sit here and veg shows for the next 3 to 4 hours. I'm just totally wiped out. I couldn't do anything else. Well, you're wiped out mentally, but you're not wiped out physically. You sat all day, most people. So, you're not tired physically. You're just drained mentally. They are not the same thing. So we tend to over-index on the resting and the relaxing. It's like we're still in the Industrial Revolution. No, you weren't mixing fabrics in a dye vat 16 hours a day. You were not. And if you were, then it doesn't apply to you, what I'm about to say. But so we rest and we relax only. That won't drain your batteries, but it won't recharge them. To recharge, which is the second ingredient, rest and recharge. To recharge, you actually have to do something that feels recharging to you, and none of those things can happen on a couch.
Hmm.
Because, if you're a creative person, you need to do the creative thing. If you're a musician, you need to play, you need to sing, you need to practice. If you're a maker, you need to go and do something with your hands to make. If you're a gardener, go and garden. Cooking is great because you can do that, at home, and maybe you can watch TV at the same time, but really kind of get into the cooking mode, kind of thing. If you're a writer, you need to write a bit. If you're athletic, you need to work out in some kind of way. If you're extroverted, go and meet with people and have some socialization. And the issue there is that it doesn't have to be, you don't have to run a marathon after work, but even 20 minutes, 30 minutes of a workout will be useful. And everyone knows this. When you force yourself to do it, and those times that you do, you come back with a second wind. You come back feeling more energized than before you left, even though you expended energy by
Yes.
going and doing the thing. But you come back feeling revitalized. That's the recharging stuff. So, you need to integrate that into your after work hours. If you can't do it every day, don't do it every day, but do it some days during the week. Give yourself that break. And the other thing that does is usually those are things that are unwork related, hopefully, right? Because you're trying to recover from that. So you are actually giving some oxygen to aspects of your identity, of your personality, of your life outside of work that don't get a lot of oxygen, that don't get a lot of stage time. That's what's reviving. You're reminding yourself that there's more to you than whatever you do at work. So it's recharging, it's reviving, it's rejuvenating in many different ways. And we have to, force ourselves. It's a threshold issue. Just get up off the couch. You know what I do? It's stupid, but I do it because it works for me. And you lie to yourself all the time. So I lie to myself and I say, just get to the gym and change into your gym clothes. And then, if you don't want to work out, change back and come home. I'm not an idiot. Of course, by the time I'm there, I might as well do something. But it convinces me. I give myself, you know what? If working out seems too hard, just get to the gym and change clothes. That's the assignment. It's much less. Just go and set up the easel and set up the paints. And then if you don't want to paint, don't paint. Open the document, get to where you were, just read the last paragraph. If you don't want to add another paragraph, don't. But do that. You know what I mean?
Just
Like
get there. Yeah.
yeah.
Sort
Put
of
yourself in a
the James
situation.
Clear, sort of like get to the gym for 2 minutes and then 3 minutes. At least just get there. And to your point, you give yourself an out, but rarely, I'm sure, once you're there at the gym, you
Yeah,
just walk out the
I've
door.
never just walked around, like that.
Okay. Um, when you're counseling people, when is it time to make a change at work? When is it time to quit your job? Like what do you see as a pattern to really sort of recommend and identify that, hey, it's actually time for you to make a change?
Look, what I suggest in this book is that the first thing you want to do is you want to kind of bring down the water so that you have breathing room, so that you're not underwater. Your head is not underwater. Because when I was burnt out, I really didn't know if I liked what I did anymore. And I couldn't tell because I was burnt out. And you don't have to be burnt out. You can be just like super stressed or in a very bad moment with your colleague, with your boss. I mean, our relationships at work are like our relationships at home. They go through good patches and bad patches often. Are you in a bad patch? Will that pass? It is temporary. Do you need to lower the stress level so that you can get a little bit more breathing room and then assess, how you feel about the thing? So first of all, do those things to lower the stress, to make life better for yourself at work and outside of work. And once you've done that, you can get a little bit more of an objective read. You have to compare to what the opportunities are that might be better or not. But can you create opportunities that are better? What are the parameters that you need to improve? What are you looking to do differently, or what do you want to feel different about? What do you want to be more excited about? Those are the questions. And so like then it's about, okay, let me see what opportunities I can create, and then I can compare. Is this one better than what I have? Is this one better than what I have? But that's the thing. Like, the standard, like, I need to make this much more money, or I need to work with people that the work-life balance, whatever the parameters are. Less of a commutes can be, deadly for people. So it's like,
Yes.
just so difficult. So if you can cut down half an hour on each way, that's like 5 hours a day that you gain, which is huge, like. So those are the parameters. But first, make sure that you know how you feel about this job that you're in, not when you're burnt out, stressed out, in a
Yes.
bad moment. Give it, like, do it in
Make a
a
rational
developmental mood.
decision when you're not on the ledge.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Yes.
Okay. One more question about that, and then a couple rapid fire questions. And I know this could be an hour topic on itself, but what do you think is the most important thing people need to understand when it comes to being really stressed at work or burnt out, and how that could impact their relationship with their partner?
Look, there's research that tells us that when one person's really stressed out at work and under the gun a lot at work, their partner can begin to develop symptoms of burnout. When one person is really stressed at work, their partner can lose their sex drive. And people say, maybe, why would the partner lose the sex drive? I'm like, because when somebody comes home irritable and tense and preoccupied, like,
Mm.
the irritability is radiating off them so much you can toast, a marshmallow. It's not attractive to anyone, like. So, and we overestimate typically how much we can keep that from our partners, how much we, prevent that from actually spilling over. But we tense up, we're preoccupied, we're checked out, and so those things really affect relationships. Difficult days at work are often followed by conflict at home. And so, we really need to. And people always say to me, "Oh, I do a good job of keeping it from my family." I'm like, ask them. Maybe you do. I don't know. Ask them. And often when they ask them, their partner goes like, "You try, honey."
That would be remarkable. I've never met anyone who has. Usually, when I talk to people, they just agree. When I mention that, like, this is like just from my own personal experience, like, I'm sure my family was miserable when I was burnt out. Usually, people just tend to agree. So I appreciate you
Because
sharing that.
moods are infectious, all of them, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
So when you're in a really bad place, when you get home, it's going to be very hard for anyone around you to feel joyful.
Yeah. Okay. A few, you don't have to be rapid fire, but a few rapid fire questions here. What's the best career advice you ever got?
I've been self-employed my entire life, so it's a little trickier for me.
But you've also written multiple like best-selling
I
books
have,
and done TED
yeah.
Talks and like it, you know, it's slightly different from you know, one of your peers who just has their own practice.
Um, okay, one of the best pieces of advice I got was about public speaking. And and it wasn't, envision the audience naked, because I don't know why you would want to do that. It will just make everyone stressed out, you included, and it's distracting as. But what the advice was find the people who nod. Those are the people who listen, who do the active nodding. Talk to them. They're the ones who are engaged. Don't look at the ones who are not. Talk to the ones who are nodding, and tell them and help them. You're there to give a message. Talk to them. Tell them.
I love that.
It's a good device. Yeah.
What's one book that's made a big impact on you that maybe you recommend other people read or that you gift the most?
Okay, it's going to sound self-serving in a way, but it's my brother's book. It's called Winning with Underdogs. And again, he started a company that showed that you can take people who are typically ignored and not chosen for work because people have biases against them, people with severe disabilities, emotional, physical. And if you manage them correctly, you can bring them up to full productivity, and you can give them a life where they might not
Mm.
have had one before. And so it's about how you find, so all his interviews, job interviews in his company, it's about finding potential. It's not about trying to stress somebody out and see how they manage. It's about, can we find potential? They literally have, when they ask questions, they have a call a friend option. Like if you need advice about how to answer that one, you can call a friend. They start interviews in the cafeteria because and they start talking about your favorite movie, your favorite sports team. Like, they want to make people, they do an amazing, and the story of how this company came about and what they do. And he has a TED talk about it. He's 67 think countries have visited him. The UN has written about him. It's a inspiring and practical guide for how to lead with caring, and it's called Winning with Underdogs. And his name is Gil, Gil, and the last name is the same. It's Winch.
Sounds amazing.
It's amazing.
What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew at 40?
um, I guess one thing I know now that I really wish I knew at 40 is that I, I should I wish I dreamed a little bit bigger sooner. In other words, and I talk about this in the book. I came here as an immigrant. My goal was to become a psychologist and have a practice, and then I won, and I did that. Got burnt out, mind you, but then I figured that out. But then I figured, like, okay, I'm won. I'm done with the race, and it's not a race, but like, well, what's the next thing? It took me a while to come up with the next thing, and I had detours all over the place where I just was doing all kinds of other things because I thought, psychology could only offer me so much. But I didn't realize there was more psychology could offer me. So if at 40 I would have said to myself, no, don't look outside of psychology all the time. Keep looking in psychology. You'll find you in
Mm,
there in ways that you don't anticipate.
I love that. What's one thing that you do to wind down in the evening?
One thing I do, just as a ritualistic, is I close the door to my office and I literally declare, okay, the evening starts now. Like I declare the shift in the evening, and this is going to sound like stupid, but one of the things that I do is I will go and I'll prepare the coffee machine for the morning, because that's my last task, duty, like obligation. Like, once I've done that, I'm free and clear.
Yeah,
So, declare the evening begins, prepare the coffee. Now I'm free. Now I can enjoy whatever the agenda is.
that's great. One of my friends' dads, he would brush his teeth at work, and then that was his way of declaring that the workday is over, and now I can be dad when I get home and not bring that
That's an
to the
interesting
house.
way to
Yeah,
symbolize that. Okay.
I might try it.
I didn't know about the toothbrushing because I think I go have dinner.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
I don't know.
you know,
Okay, last question. You're talking to someone who wants to make an impact in their in the world and in their career. Maybe they're sort of mid-career. What are 2 or 3 pieces of a life / general career advice that you would impart on them?
well, if they want to make an impact, why? Is it like, and what kind of impact do they want to make, and on how many people? Is it for specific people? Do they want to like mentor? Do they want to have a few people who they've really impacted? Is it a bigger impact? And it's a bigger impact. Why do they want to have a bigger impact? Like, is that ego? Is that some for satisfaction? Is that to achieve a certain purpose? Like, if you can
Maybe
figure
you're
out the
talking to like
why.
a university class, and you're
Uh-huh.
just sort of leaving them with a couple pieces of advice, maybe sort of general. You don't know all of them, right? Maybe you gave a talk or something like that, but what would those maybe one or two pieces of advice be?
What's the kind of impact you want to make? And
Mm.
think about who's impacted you in your life, who's inspired you, what leaders did you see that really kind of inspired you? What is it about them that inspired you? Was it their actions? Was it how they spoke to you about those actions? What was it? Because people, know that they want to have an impact, but they sometimes miss the very personal way in which that actually happens, and they go for achievement. Oh, if I do this, it'll have an impact, as opposed to like it's along the way how you do it that's going to have the bigger impact than the actual thing.
Makes sense. Guy, I love it. I want to give you that break before your next session. Thank you so much for leaning into this. I really appreciate it. And congratulations again on the book. I really loved it.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the interview. I'm sorry we couldn't go longer because
No, I'm sure we
I
could.
have a feeling you have a bunch more,
No.
and I've enjoyed it. I would happily
All right.
happily do more if I could.
Likewise. All right. Have a good one.